All right. Our goal for today is to analyze data into matrices and perform algebraic operations with matrices. So we're going to talk about what the dimensions of a matrix are, the elements of a matrix. Then we're going to talk about putting data into a matrix. And then we'll work on assignment number 1. Then we'll take our short break. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about those operations. So this first part is what we're going to focus on for right now, is analyzing data into matrices. Before we can analyze the data, though, we're really going to have to understand how to identify the dimensions of a matrix. And that is one of the biggest things from now until the end of the unit, which we should finish up this unit right before spring break. But knowing how to state the dimensions of a matrix is going to be a key factor for every lesson from here on out. Okay? So my hint to you is learn how to identify the dimensions today so that it will help you every day we're in class from here until spring break, versus if you wait 2 weeks, then you've lost a lot of points along the way when you have to learn it eventually anyways. Make sense? So let's learn it now. All right. So what is a matrix? A matrix is a rectangular array of numbers written with square brackets. So these square brackets with numbers in them are considered a matrix. You can see there are 4 columns of numbers. There are 3 rows of numbers. Okay? So 1, 2, 3 rows. One, 2, 3, 4 columns. Okay. When we state the dimensions, now this is matrix A. And matrix A is a 3 by 4 matrix. You're always going to count the number of rows, and the rows come first. And then you'll count the number of columns, and that's the number that comes second. Now, order does matter. This is not a 4 by 3 matrix. It is a 3 by 4 matrix. And it's important that you're able to come up with that. Okay, there are a lot of points built in from now until spring break on quizzes that will all be having to identify dimensions. Okay. Each of the numbers in the matrix are considered an element. Okay. So again, from the matrix above, it says locate A. The small a just tells us that it's coming from matrix capital A. Okay, 1, 4 tells you that it's in row 1 because rows come first, and it's in column 4. So when you number your rows, this would be 1, 2, 3. You just count down, and then just as you would read a book, you count 1, 2, 3, 4 across. So this one is in row 1, so this first row, and it's in column 4, so row 1, column 1, 2, 3, 4. That number is 5, so the element that it is looking for here is 5. That's the number that's in that location. See if you can figure out where to locate A, 2, 3. Okay, try that one. Did we find it? What number is there? 4 should be there, yes. So we are in row 2, so the middle row, column 3, 1, 2, 3. It's this 4 right here. Okay. Why don't we take a break from notes and let's do numbers 1 through
11.
1 through 20. Wait a minute. 1 through 20. Because in 13 through 20, you're just finding the dimensions. So I'll do the number 1 with you and I'll do number 13 with you, and then I'll give you some time to finish them up. Okay? So number 1, which matrix are we going to look at? Matrix A or matrix B? B. And what row are we going to be in on matrix B? Row 2, so it's somewhere in this first row. And then which column are we going to look in? So we're in row 2, column 3, which is this number 1 right here. Give me a 1 through 5. I think I can handle 1 through 12. Okay, good. Then, once you have done 1 through 12, then you move on to these ones, which it says to state the dimensions of the given matrix. So how many rows do we have in 13? 3. I always write the number here. I have 1, 2, 3 across. And how many columns? 2. And then if I write it here and then here, this comes first and then this. It already is in order. And this is a 3 by 2 matrix. Okay. Give me a 1 through 5. I can handle coming up with the dimensions of a matrix. All right, cool. So we are going to keep moving on and talk about how to organize the matrices organize data into matrices. Now that we actually know how to find elements and we know how to find dimensions. It says organize the data into a matrix. Now on your assignment you'll notice that it will say in this case, let's do it in a 4 by 2 matrix. Okay, and it will say with labels. You'll notice that that's what it says right on your assignment, is to organize the gas mileage in a 2 by 5 matrix with labels is what it says. So that's exactly how we're going to do it. It'll tell us the dimensions that we have to have our matrix in, and it will tell us it has to have labels. So when we go to make this 4 by 2, I'm going to need 4 rows, and I'm going to need 2 columns. That means each of my rows needs a label. And so the label that I'm going to use is the label from the table. Okay? Now, not all the time does it give you a table. It might give you some sentences that tell you the data. Okay? So you'll have to kind of read through the sentence and figure out what those labels need to be. This one breaks it apart into the age groups of 0 to 19 years old, 20 to 39 years old, 40 to 59 years old, and 60 plus years old. I'm going to label 2 columns. And what should I label these columns as? The gender, the male and female. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the table based on how this table is. So the males that were 0 to 19 years old was 7.1. Does that make sense to have 7.1 males? What is it? Why is it 7.1? It's million, 7.1 million. So 7,100,000 is actually the number that's talking about. Okay. If you read that, that's what it is. It's the Latino population in the U.S. in millions. So there are 7.1 million male Latinos in the U.S. That's what that number represents. How many females in that age group? 6.6. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to fill in the rest of this. And like I said, most of the time, though, it's not given to you in a table. They will give you a couple sentences with data in it, and you have to organize the table. So it's not just a matter of copying from here to here. Okay? But that's what you want to think of it as, is think about if I wanted to make a table of this data, how would I make a table? And that's what you're going to do with the matrix. Okay? Now, on your assignment, I didn't make you add the elements or anything like that, so that's going to be your big idea, but I do want you to see the significance of it. Sometimes when you add up a column, it actually gives you a new piece of data. Okay? So if I were to add the columns, I would have a male column and I have a female column. When I add up the male column, what number do we get? What is it? 17.3? I don't think it was 17.3. Something 0.2. 18.2? Okay. And when I add up the female column, how many do I get? $16.1. Thank you. So if I add up 7.1, 6.8, 3.2, 1.1, I get 18.2. If I add up 6.6, 5.9, 2.2, and 1.4, I get 16.1. Okay? It says to interpret these results. So can someone tell me a sentence of what that 18.2 number is representing? There are 18.2 million what? Latino males in the U.S. Okay, those numbers are representing Latino population in the U.S. So if I add up all the males, that's the total number of male Latinos in the U.S. Okay. How about a sentence for the 16.1 number? What could I say about the 16.1 number? Yeah, so there are 16. You word it the exact same way, but instead of 18.2, we're now going to use 16.1, and then now instead of males, we'll use the word females. Okay? So there are 16.1 million Latino females in the U.S. Alright, so next it says to add the elements of each row. So if I'm looking at my matrix here, I'm now going to add up the first row and the second row and the third row and the fourth row. Let's figure out what these numbers are when I add them. So if I add that first row, the 7.1 and the 6.6, what's the total I get? 13.7. When I add the next row, what do I get? 12.8? 12.7, yeah, I think that's right. How about the next row? $5.4. And the last row? For saving time, I'm not going to go through each of these sentences, but we'll write one of the sentences and then we'll know how to write the rest of them. Because just like here, when you split it up into the columns, the sentences are going to be the same. It's just different per group. Okay? So what are each of these numbers representing here? In total what? Yes, in the age group. It's the total Latino population in specific age groups. Okay? So for like that first number, we would say there are 13.7 million Latinos in the U.S. aged, and that first group was 0 to 19 years old. And then we would write, 3 more sentences like that. They would look very similar, but the number would change, and then the age group would, then the next one would be between 20 to 39 years old. And then the next one would be from 40 to 59 years old. Okay, but that's just a sample of what each of those sentences would represent. Now, sometimes when you add these up, they don't necessarily make sense. It just kind of depends on what the data is. Okay. In this case, if we were to find the average, if you were to take the total and find the average, or over here, total, find the average, it doesn't give us any meaningful data. Okay? So in this case, if you find the averages, it's not meaningful data. Now, if you had like trials, okay, so maybe you talked about one person and they did 4 different trials of something and maybe it was a score they earned, you could take the average and then you could say it's their average score or their average whatever. If you had trials for per person or per object, then it would actually count towards more of like an average, would actually mean something in that case. Okay, so in this case, it's not meaningful data, but sometimes it is. So what you can do now is, if you go back to assignment number 1, you should be able to finish up numbers 21, 22, and 23 on this assignment with organizing data into matrices.
So after this assignment, I'm returning on the